We are a church that is here to help people find and follow Jesus. And so we're discovering this Jesus more and more, just what he's asking for us in our lives. And one of the things that we found very fascinating is that Jesus asks 307 different questions. I just want you to consider that for a moment, for the amount of words of Jesus from his mouth in the scriptures. Out of that many times, he asked 307 questions. He's only asked 183 questions. But out of that 183 questions, he only answers fewer than 10 of those questions. And it's powerful because today we're going to look at 2 more questions that he asks. And I believe these questions really should challenge us. And so I appreciate the prayer from Luke that I want to talk to us today about something that we need to hear. It may challenge us and get below the surface a little bit, but I think that's important for us. So we're going to continue with Jesus is the question, and basically Jesus is the question to our answers. So the questions that he's going to ask today kind of have a sequence to them. One scratches just the surface, but the next question that he asks goes below the surface and makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. But I believe the second question is one that we should be asking ourselves daily. On a daily basis, we need to be asking ourselves this question. Because I believe the more we ask this question, the better we're going to be able to follow him. But also, he's going to take us to some unfamiliar places in our lives. Some places that are challenging. Right down into the hearts of our lives. And at first glance, when I show you these questions, you're going to look at them and you're just going to say, yeah, okay. They don't seem too difficult. But the more you sit with them, I believe they really challenge us. So I'm going to show you right off the top. Here's the 2 questions. Who do people say I am? And who do you say I am? Who do people say I am? And who do you say I am? These are 2 questions that have echoed throughout the past 2,000 years with Jesus asking these questions. And I still believe they challenge us today. These are questions that are going to require us to reflect on our faith. What do we really believe? And they help us to reflect on our relationship with this Jesus. Because if we're following this Jesus, where is he leading us? And depending on how you answer these 2 questions will depend on how far you're willing to be led by Jesus. And when Jesus asks these questions, he's not seeking affirmation. Jesus is not seeking validation with these 2 questions. He already knows who he is, and he knows what his mission is. Rather, he was asking his disciples to reflect on their own faith and their own understanding of who he is. So what I want to do is I want you to hear how some people from New York City answered, who is Jesus? Because I think it's important, because we all come from different places and levels in our faith. And I think this is really important to look at. Let's just look at how some other people describe who is Jesus. Here we go.
Historical figure?
I don't know. I think he was just a person. I don't know.
Just a normal person like us.
He was a selfless person.
I have no clue. He was a man.
I think he was marketing genius because he got people to believe him.
I don't think he's the son of God. I don't believe that at all.
If David Copperfield was in the day of Jesus, he would be Jesus.
I'm pretty sure he existed. I'm not going to say that he didn't exist.
He was God's son, but so was Gandhi, and so was Muhammad, and so was, we're all God's children.
Jesus is someone I pray to.
Well, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And he, to me, is the symbol of just ultimate forgiveness and ultimate love. He's sort of that constant figure in my life.
Jesus is also Isa in Arabic, and he was a messenger as well.
He was just extremely enlightened, religiously and morally.
Was somebody that just tried to impart wisdom on others and make the world a better place.
I think he saw something that a lot of people didn't see and still don't see in others. And I think that's just a lot of love and hope.
Jesus sort of seemed like an ominous figure. You know, he was God, and it was hard to relate to him. But I think as I've grown in my faith a lot, I've really started to see Jesus as my closest friend.
I don't know if you resonate with some of those answers, but these are two questions that we really need to come to grips with. And sometimes simple questions are one of the most difficult questions to answer. And so these two questions that Jesus asks are actually in the gospel accounts. They're in Mark, that we're going to look at today, but they're also in Matthew. So two gospel accounts ask these two questions. Matthew, in Matthew chapter 16, gets into a little bit more detail. It's in more of a conversation one-on-one with Peter. But Mark 8 doesn't go into that much detail, but I want to look at Mark 8 because I've come to learn to love the fact that if you were to visit my house and you were to stand at the front door, you would get a pretty good look to the living room, maybe a hallway down to the kitchen. So you'd have a pretty good idea if someone was to ask you, hey, have you ever been to Bruce's house? Yeah, I stood outside the door and you know what? Well, yeah, what's it like? You'd be able to describe a little bit. But if I invited you in and took you on a tour of my house and showed you all the other rooms and the places upstairs and downstairs, you would have a better inkling as to what my house was all about. And I think this is important because the Gospels kind of work like this. The Gospels work in a way where the different accounts bring us more knowledge or more insight into what Jesus was all about. And so there's two questions that are raised in Mark chapter 8, and then we're going to get there. But I want you to see how Mark started off his gospel, how he started off writing about Jesus, because there's no doubt in my mind who Mark thinks Jesus is. Listen to how he says it. In Mark chapter 1, verse 1, this is how he starts. This is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. And I love how later on, as Jesus is on the cross, Mark makes sure that this gets put in, because there was a Roman soldier that watched Jesus die. And this is the Roman soldier's response. When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God." So Mark's not afraid to put in who he thinks Jesus is. But right in the middle is where the question's asked, and he's writing this account of Jesus and the questions that he asked his disciples. And I think this is really important. What's happened is the disciples have just left Galilee. Their crowds have been pouring into Jesus. There's been many needs, and they are tired. And they just want some time with Jesus. And so what they do is they've gone to a place that's a little less crowded. And they've had a chance now to just talk with Jesus as they walk along. One of my favorite things about Jesus is how he teaches. You'll find him teaching around a table in a home as he walked along. And so he's having this conversation with his disciples. And they were aware that there was a lot of speculation going on about this Jesus. People were talking everywhere, like kind of what these people in New York were talking, and giving answers about who Jesus was. And when they came to Caesarea Philippi, Jesus wants to know, what's been the rumors floating around about me? And so he asks them. And so I want to look at this closely today. It's found in Mark chapter 8, 27 through 29. This is the conversation Jesus has as they walk along. Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you are one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Now, I have to laugh. There was a man who, maybe some of you have tried to fly in the last little time, where airports were shutting down flights, and it's been chaos. Well, there was a man stuck at the airport because his flight was canceled. And like many travelers, they had to wait in long lines to kind of just get alternative arrangements to arrange for flights home. And this man was starting to get really impatient and angry. And he storms to the front counter where there's a woman there trying to help people. And he just storms right up to her. He says, "Ma'am, I need a ticket for home. And I don't care how you get it, but I want to be served my ticket right now." The counter staff then said to him, "Sir, I would love to help you, but there are many people in front of you. So would you mind going to the back of the line and we'll get to you when it's your turn?" The man says, "No. Do you not know who I am?" The lady said, "Sir, I am sorry. I do not know who you are." "What? You don't know who I am?" "Yes, sir. I'm afraid I do not know who you are." "Don't you really know who I am?" "I don't know who you are." "Well, you should know who I am." And at this point, the lady graciously takes the microphone to speak to it. And she says, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We have a situation right here. A man doesn't know who he is. If any one of you knows his identity, would you please come to counter number 7? Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Who do the people say I am? Jesus is curious. But this is just scratching the surface. But I believe it would be really interesting if Jesus was to come to you today and sit beside you right now and ask you this question. "Hey, tell me what the people say about me. Who do they say I am? Oh, and by the way, who do you say I am?" Because when Jesus asks his friends this question, they begin to answer the question with ease. I mean, it just rolls off their tongue, right? Because these are the rumors that are going around. Some say that you're John the Baptist, some say that you're Elijah, and others say that you're a prophet. And these are all names of people who would have been familiar with because of the writings of the Torah and the prophets. You see, they were names of people who were going to prepare the way for the Messiah. And Jesus is asking his disciples, "Who do the people say I am?" In other words, what are the rumors going on about me? And so some say John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist had an interesting conversation with Jesus, but also at this time, most likely he has been beheaded by Herod. His life did not go all that well. It ended really just awfully by losing his head. And yet John was someone that the scriptures wrote about, that he was to prepare the way for the Messiah. He even said that he was not even worthy to untie the sandals of Jesus. But some people thought, this is John the Baptist. Or maybe even some thought, he's risen from the dead. And then also some say that you're Elijah. Because, Elijah, there was many waiting the return of Elijah. Do you know how Elijah died? He was swept up in a whirlwind. He was one of the very few that didn't actually die. He was taken away. And they're waiting for him to come back to bring reconciliation. He was one of the greatest prophets and teachers of all time. Do you know that still to this day, our Jewish friends, they have a meal, the Seder meal or the Passover meal that they celebrate, and they leave an empty chair for Elijah because they're awaiting his return. They held Elijah in high regard, and they saw Jesus do these amazing things. So some are saying this must be Elijah. And then some say you're the prophet. You're one of the prophets, Jesus. And here's one of the most agreed on upon statements. Because we can just say, you know what, yeah, you're one of the prophets. It's obvious that you know people's stories, because when he was with the woman at the well, he knew her whole story, and she says, "I can see that you're a prophet." And Jesus was doing miraculous things, and so people knew something was special about this man. Do you know that even our Islamic friends, they will tell you that he is a prophet, but he's not as great as Muhammad. They will tell you that he did not rise from the dead. And our Jewish friends will tell you that he was a godly man and a prophet. And there are many who believe that Jesus was a great teacher or a prophet, but don't believe that he was God in the flesh. So during Jesus' day, these are the rumors going around about who they think Jesus is. So then Jesus wants to get to the heart of the matter. This is just scratching the surface. Now he's going to get really down to the deep parts of the surface, down below the surface. And he says, who do you say I am? And this is like a mic drop question, because now it's personal. What do? Do you drop your head and just hope that someone else is going to answer the question? Do you take your eyes off Jesus because you're embarrassed and you don't know how to answer the question? How would you answer that question if he came today and sat beside you? Who is this Jesus? Who do you say I am? Do you hang your head and just hope someone else takes the first stab at the question? Because when Jesus asked this question to his disciples, he was not seeking affirmation and validation. Jesus knew who he was, and he knew what his mission was. He's not like we today when we get together with our friends. Oh, did you hear anything about him? Did he say anything about me? Does he like me? And we get into these ideas of we want validation as to who we are. How do other people see us? What's it like to be on the other side of me? But Jesus knew exactly who he was. But he wants to know what his disciple friends say about him. And Peter, never one to be shy, cracks open the silence and he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." In Jesus' day, do you know that this answer could have been very critical to Peter? It could have meant life or death. Because if it is true, it has the power to turn the whole world upside down, which we see and we can read about, and it does. But if it's not true, you can get yourself stoned to death because of blasphemy for saying it. And there are still many countries today in our world that if you were to claim that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, it means death. So to Peter and the other disciples, Jesus was not just a wise teacher or a charismatic leader. He was someone who had transformed their lives. Jesus was someone who inspired them to leave their livelihoods, and they followed him. So the first question's easy. Who do the people say I am? Who do your friends say Jesus is? What are the conversations around the coffee shop about who Jesus is? And that's a lot different than the second question that goes below the surface and makes us feel uncomfortable, because there is a lifestyle that goes around with the answer to the second question. The answer to this question means that you can no longer sit on the fence and see from both sides. It requires you to jump off to one side or the other. For our poker friends who love to play poker, it's when you go all in. It's going all in for Jesus. Because you can't answer this question flippantly with just some kind of insight from your mind. It demands your allegiance of your very life. I love C.S. Lewis was a great writer, wrote many books that turned into movies, and maybe you've seen some of them, but he was a great thinker of this day, and I love his words here because they really challenge us. And this is what he said years ago. He said, "I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God." Then he says, "That is one thing we must not say. A man who is merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else would be the devil of hell." And he goes on, he says, "You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him, and you can kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord." That is challenging. When I was a student in high school, I remember how much I preferred the true and false questions on an exam. It meant I got a 50% chance of getting it right. But man, this, who do you say that I am? It demands an answer. And I can't even write an essay about it and try to look at it from all these different angles. What are my options? I want to say yes, but on the other hand, it doesn't allow us to do that. Jesus wants to know, who do you say I am? And perhaps we're more likely to just talk generally about God because we cannot bring ourselves to believe the notion that Jesus was actually God in the flesh. But often the opposite's the case. Our uneasiness with Jesus may not derive from our doubt that God was Jesus in a unique way. Rather, our uneasiness may flow from our suspicion that it might be true. And if it is true, we must confront God and confront ourselves more fully. And who feels entirely ready for that? So where does this leave us today? In many ways, it's a question that we must answer for ourselves individually, but also collectively as a church. It requires us to reflect on our own faith about who this Jesus is and our understanding of God's plan for us. And to answer this question, we must first understand who Jesus was and what he stood for, because he was not just a historical figure or a great teacher. He was the Son of God, sent to earth to redeem us and to reconcile us. He was the embodiment of God's love and compassion, the way he lived his life. And he demonstrated this love through his teachings and his actions. And when we answer this question, who do you say I am? We are acknowledging our relationship with Jesus and our understanding of his role in our lives. It's a question that requires us to look beyond ourselves to our own desires and our own wants, and to align ourselves with God's desire and his plan for us. Now, I got to share this. There was a time my wife and I took my son Luke to a Blue Jays game, Toronto Blue Jays game. The rest of the kids were busy. And we drove from Niagara to Burlington, about an hour away, and then got on the GO train and went to watch the Toronto Blue Jays play baseball. We got to the Sky Dome, and of course, beautiful day. The roof was open on the Sky Dome, and this was before it was Rogers Place. And then we get to watch this game, and it was wonderful. The food was expensive while you were there, sitting there, and those hot dogs just looked way too good. So we enjoyed some of the food. But I remember it was a great game, and the Blue Jays won that day. And I remember my wife turned to me and said, "We won!" And I started laughing. "We won?" "Yeah, we won." I said, I said, "When did you become part of the team?" She was wondering why I was laughing. I smiled. We said, "Because you said we won. You made it sound like actually you had something to do with them winning." Then I began to describe her relationship with the Blue Jays. You've never watched a Blue Jays game from the time we've been married. You have no idea who the players are. You don't even know the rules for baseball, but you say we won. Like somehow after the post game, you're going to get interviewed by somebody, or someone's going to say, we really couldn't have won this game without Marnie. What an inspiration to our team. If it wasn't for her, well, there's no way we would have been able to pull through. And we laughed together. And I just want you to know, I'm not throwing her under the bus. She gave me this analogy. So you can make fun of her baseball skills later. But I think sometimes that's how we answer the question of who is Jesus. Oh, Jesus, yeah, we're on the same team. Me and him, we're good. Oh, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I'm a Jesus follower. And just like my wife's life shows how much of a baseball fan she is by showing up to one game, in the same way it could be that nothing in our life shows that we follow Jesus other than maybe showing up for church once in a while. Because there's so much more than showing up for church. And to reach the depth of this question, we must examine our own hearts and minds and ask ourselves, are we truly committed to following Jesus and living our lives in accordance with his teachings? And this is where it gets uncomfortable for me, because I sit back and I look at my life and think how many times I've chosen to do what Bruce wants. We had a discussion on Tuesday night over coffee about there's two paths that you can go. You can live in the Eden story, or you can live in your own story. And how many times have I chosen my own story? And Jesus is asking us this question because he's inviting us into a bigger story. And am I willing to put aside my own desires and ambitions to surrender myself to Jesus? And ultimately, the question is, who do you say I am, is a daily question that we must ask ourselves. Are we following Jesus into those uncomfortable places because we have great faith in who he is as being the Christ, the Son of the living God? Jesus knew that you would have trouble with this answer, but how you answer this question will determine on how far you're willing to go to complete his mission. It's a call to deepen our faith, to live our lives in accordance with God's will, and to model that love and compassion that Jesus showed others. It's a life that is dedicated to making Jesus known because we're his biggest fans and we're on the same team. And we believe that what he said to be true. So, how do I, Bruce Boland, answer this question? How do I answer, who is this Jesus? I believe with everything in my heart and in my life, everything depends on him. I want nothing more than to journey with you as a church family to discover everything we can about who this Jesus is. I believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that I can lean on this Jesus in times of trouble and when those storms come. I am continuously being challenged by his words, yet I have made a commitment to put them into practice. I have entrusted everything in my life to this Jesus. My family, my livelihood, my thoughts, my goals, my calendar. I want to shout out as loud as I can that I believe he is, and only he is, the Lord of this church. And that this Jesus is God in the flesh, who became a human for us to show us how to live as a human. And that this friend of mine is the Christ, the creator and the savior of this world. And that he gave his life as a ransom to rescue me from my sin and shame. And I live in my shame no longer. And that he paid the price with his very own blood, that I could be united with him and raised to new life along with him. And I am seated with him in the heavenly realms. And this Jesus is worth following. My question is for you. Who do you say Jesus is? Maybe it's a good idea for us to kind of sit with that question as we're going to have some time to reflect on who Jesus is. We're here to remember Christ and what he has done for us. But I want you to make it personal this morning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some time to just sit in silence for a little while as we partake in the communion together. So if you have not had a chance already, if you would like to get some communion, this is your opportunity to do that. If you're a guest with us, we are grateful that you're here. You're welcome to participate. If you want to just sit with us, you're welcome to do that too. So what I'm going to do is we're going to play a video, and some other young people are going to answer the question of who is this Jesus. We're going to watch this together, and then I'm going to pray for both the fruit of the vine and the bread together, and then we're just going to sit in silence and just remember for a few moments. And just want you to reflect on that question of who is Jesus? Who do you say he is? Here we go.
Who was Jesus? Who is Jesus?
That's the question.
That's the question.
Was he a real person?
What did he say?
What did he do?
What made him so special?
What made him different than any other man in history?
The records show.
His birth was a miracle.
His mom was a virgin and she was pregnant.
He made the blind see.
The deaf hear.
The mute speak.
The paralyzed walk.
He healed terrible diseases.
He knew what was in men's minds. He knew what was in men's hearts.
He knows what is in men's hearts.
He knew the story of people's lives without ever having met them.
He spoke with authority.
He amazed teachers.
He amazed everyone. Nature obeyed him.
He turned water into wine.
He walked on water.
He walked on top of the water.
He could change the weather.
He fed 5,000 people from one lunchbox.
He brought people who were dead back to life.
He loved sinners.
He loved everyone.
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 He forgave sins.
He never made a mistake.
He never once sinned.
But we judged him.
We whipped and beat him.
We spit on him.
And we killed him.
He loved us anyway.
He loves us anyway.
He died for us.
He died so that we wouldn't have to.
He paid for our sins with his life.
Did I mention he loves us?
He came back to life.
He was dead.
Then he was alive.
A lot of people saw him.
He is coming back.
Who is Jesus?
That's a big question.
That's the big question.
What does it even matter?
What does it matter to you?
Who is Jesus?
My answer doesn't matter to you.
Only your answer matters to you.
Who do you say that he is?
Who do you say that he is?